you ever noticed how almost every horror game puts you in some scenario that you'd normally see and just say, no thanks? Abtos Covert at least uses military service as a context to explain why you must remain alone in a remote outpost that is apparently subject to excessive interest from supernatural beings. You have your orders and are duty bound to follow them rather than simply refusing for the sake of sanity. The game is essentially a strategic survival horror where you need to manage the outpost with a limited electricity supply to make it through 5 nights alone. Only you won't be alone as such. The CCTV and motion sensor security systems will alert you as the creepy ghouls move in, and some classic paranormal distractions will do their best to freak you out and keep you on edge. It may be a little crudely put together in places, but there's no denying that it makes for a pretty effective experience, one that is definitely immersive and creates palpable tension as the various ghosts and monsters try to cut your night short. Abtos Covert is a bit unusual when it comes to implementing a photo mode, in that it isn't available while actually playing the game. Instead, it's an entirely different game mode that is accessed from the start screen. Opening it will load the outpost area with all visual quality settings at maximum. This comes at some cost to performance, but I actually welcome this and think that photo mode should always take full advantage of the assets. The same level of thought hasn't quite gone into the control scheme yet though, unfortunately. Controller support is terrible, with only the left stick working at all, so keyboard and mouse are needed. There's also no vertical camera craning, so you'll have to look up and down and move the camera that way just to change its height. Otherwise though, the camera movement is good and virtually unlimited thanks to infinite range and no clip behaviour, so it can pass through any object unhindered. This offers a great amount of freedom to explore the entire area and easily get into tight spaces for some more interesting angles. If you do get a bit lost, just hit the R key to reset to the starting location. All of the other features are shown on the UI, though it's really more of a button legend than any sort of functional menu system. It's split into 2 parts, one showing the camera controls, which can be hidden separately, and another with grouped options for positioning, light, focus, and enemies, plus inputs for the thirds grid and camera speed modes that aren't currently working properly. All settings are altered using pre-assigned keyboard keys, and while some are totally arbitrary and never really intuitive, others are fairly logical, like plus and minus to change a focal length for example. This is a well implemented feature actually, with a huge range that covers extreme wide angles, too wide perhaps, and very long telephoto zoom. Complementing this, depth of field is controlled with aperture f-stop values to add background and, to a lesser extent, foreground defocus blur, along with a nice circular bokeh. The effect is also more pronounced at longer focal lengths, so if you aren't quite getting the shallow depth of field you're looking for, just try a longer lens. Focus is entirely manual and works as you might expect, just ignore the fact that the distance is in centimeters when it should be meters, while the lighting options include a couple of different exposure settings. A fairly standard exposure is used to brighten or darken the overall image, and a second post-exposure setting is more biased towards the highlights, useful for exaggerating light sources. Last on the UI options, but certainly not least, is the ability to spawn in 2 different enemy characters, the undead soldier and the somewhat freaky Katarina, who isn't much more alive herself. Pressing 1 or 2 on the keyboard will spawn either character and place them wherever the center reticule is aiming. Animated by default, they will then stagger around the place, but at least aren't hell-bent on showing you the game over screen this time. It's also possible to freeze them in place, and best of all, whatever pose they are in at the time is retained as you respawn them elsewhere. This means you can choose a pose or action for the enemy character model and then fine-tune their positioning to create the shot. It's probably the crowning achievement of this photo mode, and one that actually transforms what can be done with it. You may as well take your time, because once in the photo mode, there seems to be no way out other than closing the game entirely. The photo opportunities may initially seem limited, with just 4 rooms, not much furniture, and only a couple of other outbuildings in the compound. There's only so much to see here. It shouldn't take long though before the sheer freedom starts to lead to some ideas. Firstly, you can literally go anywhere, so it's a chance to explore beyond the compound and roam the map where you might find a bit of wildlife and, oh, hi there. Really though, it's this ability to place enemy characters that makes all the difference. Okay, there's only 2 to choose from, but this is a rare opportunity in a native photo mode to be able to orchestrate your own scene. It suddenly becomes much more than a standard photo mode that relies entirely on what's happening in the game and opens up a different kind of creativity. Take control and seize the chance to direct shots that look like something straight out of a horror movie. Abtos Covert takes an unconventional approach to including photo mode in the game, and it's certainly not without its flaws. Poor controls and a lacking UI make it quite clumsy to use, but the outstanding freedom and some important key features give it a lot of potential. At a time when certain other photo modes don't even achieve the bare essentials, seeing some of these ideas from such a small team is a very welcome future prospect.